You expect a slow fade with dementia. That's what they tell you, memories drift, clarity comes and goes, the light dims over time. But with my father, it was different. 1 month he was sharp as a tack, the next he barely recognized my name. And somewhere in between, a new nurse showed up. Young. Sweet. Too sweet. The kind of sweet that sticks to your ribs, and hides something sour underneath. Dad had always been a force. The kind of man who could command a room without raising his voice. He was a former army officer, lifelong mechanic, and the undisputed king of grilling in our neighborhood. He used to say, "The day I forget the difference between a carburetor and a catalytic converter, just put me in the ground." And then, it started. Little things at first. Forgetting where he left his wallet. Repeating a story 2, 3 times at dinner. Mixing up dates, names. The kind of things you dismiss as normal aging, until they start stacking up like bricks you can't ignore. I moved back into the house after the 3rd incident, when he left the stove on overnight and nearly burned the place down. I didn't hesitate. I left my apartment, put the rest in storage, and came back home. He didn't argue. Not at first. We had a routine. Mornings with coffee, afternoons in the garage, evenings watching old westerns. He still cracked jokes, still lit up when he heard Johnny Cash on the radio. But his frustration was building. Every forgotten word chipped away at him. He hated needing help. That's when the social worker suggested a part-time nurse. Said it would give me a break. Let me handle errands, work calls, and life beyond the 4 walls of my childhood home. Her name was Elise. She arrived like a breeze through an open window, all warm smiles and soft-voiced reassurances. Mid-30s, maybe younger, with striking eyes and a calm presence that made even Dad sit a little straighter. At first, I was grateful. She was gentle with him. Knew how to steer conversations when he got confused. She laughed at his jokes, even the ones I'd heard 1,000 times. And he adored her. Called her darlin' like he was 30 years younger. But then, things started shifting. Fast. He went from a little forgetful to lost. Within a month of Elise starting, he forgot how to use the coffee maker, the same one he used every morning for 10 years. He started calling me by his brother's name. One night, I found him sitting in the backyard at midnight, barefoot and shivering, convinced he was back at Fort Benning. I asked Elise if she'd noticed the change. She said it was common for the condition to progress this way. That some patients declined fast. Said not to worry, said she had it under control. But there was something in her tone, too polished, too practiced. And something in Dad's behavior around her that didn't sit right. He'd go quiet when she entered the room. Flustered. Embarrassed, almost. Like he was hiding something. And Elise? She started staying longer. Said her shift ended at 5, but she'd still be there at 7, sitting close on the couch with him, her hand resting just a little too long on his knee. I told myself I was overreacting. That I was tired. Paranoid. That watching someone you love fade like this makes you see monsters in the mirror. But then I found the pills. Dad's sleep medication, untouched for days. The anti-anxiety meds. Dosage wrong. Some half dissolved in a glass behind the sink. Elise had been logging everything as administered as prescribed. I confronted her. She didn't blink. Said maybe Dad had dropped a few, or maybe I'd miscounted. Said she always followed instructions, always. She smiled when she said it. But it didn't reach her eyes. The next day, I checked the camera I'd installed in the hallway, something I'd put up after the stove incident, just for peace of mind. And what I saw turned that peace into ash. It was late. Past midnight. Elise was there, still there. Sitting beside Dad on the couch. He looked confused, drowsy, eyes blinking too slow. She was whispering to him, brushing his hair back. Then she leaned in. Too close. Kissed his cheek, then his mouth. And he didn't stop her. Didn't push back. Just sat there, vacant, dazed, gone. I shut the laptop. My heart was a drum in my chest. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And I was done pretending not to see it. When you're the only one watching, the line between suspicion and certainty gets real thin. I kept telling myself maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like on that hallway cam. But I knew better. The next morning, I called the agency that assigned Elise. I kept my tone calm, professional, asked if they could verify her credentials, background check, anything. The woman on the line got cagey real fast. Is something wrong, Mr. Dalton? I didn't answer that. Just asked again. She said she'd look into it and call me back. She never did. That's when I drove down there myself. The office was a shoebox, tucked between a payday loan place and a nail salon. One receptionist, one manager, an older woman with reading glasses and a stiff smile. I showed her a still frame from the camera footage. Didn't say anything. Just watched her reaction. She went pale. Said Elise wasn't with them anymore. That she'd been let go a few weeks prior due to boundary concerns. When I asked what that meant, she fumbled. Just professional conduct issues. Nothing illegal, but enough that we had to cut ties. So I asked the real question. Was this the first time? She didn't answer. But she didn't deny it either. That was enough. I left that office knowing one thing: Elise had done this before, maybe not exactly this, but close enough that someone had looked the other way until it was too late. When I got home, Dad was in the den, staring at an unplugged TV. I sat next to him. Asked him how he was feeling. He looked at me, puzzled, like I was interrupting something only he could see. She was here, he mumbled. The girl with the eyes. She tells me I'm safe. His hands were shaking. His eyes glossed over, like the man behind them had packed up and gone. I asked him if he remembered her name. He didn't. But then he leaned in, whispered like it was a secret. Don't tell your mother. My mother had been dead for 5 years. That night, I opened his pill organizer. Counted every dose. Half were missing. But not just the ones he should have taken. Some extras too. The sedatives. A couple antipsychotics that weren't even prescribed. I searched the trash. The bathroom. Finally, the guest bedroom where Elise used to keep her bag during shifts. Tucked beneath the dresser, I found a small white bottle. No label. Just a scuffed plastic cap and half a dozen blue pills inside. I snapped a picture and drove straight to the pharmacy. The pharmacist looked at it and frowned. That's lorazepam. Strong stuff. Not something you mess with. I asked what would happen if someone without a prescription took it. In a person his age. Could cause confusion, memory issues, loss of motor skills. Especially if combined with other meds. And if it builds up in the bloodstream. Could mimic early-stage dementia. There it was. My father wasn't just sick. He was being drugged. And suddenly, the look on Elisa's face, the way she hovered just close enough, whispered to him like they shared some secret world, it all made sense. This wasn't care. It was control. Manipulation, wrapped in the soft language of comfort. I sat in the car outside the pharmacy for a long time that night. Phone in my hand. Thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to call the police. The agency. Her. Anyone. But a deeper part, the son in me, wanted to go back in that house and fix this myself. I wanted to look Elise in the eyes and ask her what kind of person preys on a man who spent his life raising 2 kids, working with his hands, loving his family with everything he had. The next morning, I got my chance. She came back. Unannounced. Unscheduled. Just walked into the house like she'd never left. She came in like it was any other day. Light knock on the door, a smile too casual for someone who'd been caught sneaking around the edges of my father's decline. I met her at the threshold. "You're not scheduled," I said, not moving from the doorway. She smiled, a polished, practiced smile, like she'd rehearsed it in the car. "I just wanted to check on him," she said sweetly. "I know I'm not officially on anymore, but I was worried. He's been sensitive lately." Sensitive. That was one word for it. I didn't step aside. I wanted her to know this wasn't going to be another quiet day in Dad's den, whispering poison into his ear. But then I heard him, from the back of the house. "Elise?" His voice sounded clearer than it had in days. He was looking for her. Like a dog looking for its leash. I stepped aside just enough to let her pass, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see it. Needed to watch whatever spell she had over him work in real time. She walked into the living room like she owned the place, dropped her purse on the side table, and knelt in front of his recliner like a penitent disciple. "Hey, handsome," she cooed, brushing his hand with hers. And he lit up. God help me, he lit up. Like this woman was sunlight and the rest of us were just cold shadows. He didn't even glance at me. She poured him some tea, which I watched her prepare, and sat beside him like nothing had changed. The way she draped her hand over his, the soft voice she used when asking if he remembered what show they were watching yesterday, it was intimate. Wrong. But somehow, it worked on him. And it made my stomach turn. When she stepped into the kitchen to rinse the mug, I followed. "You need to leave," I said, low, quiet. She turned, blinking like I'd surprised her. "I'm not doing anything wrong, Michael." She always called me Michael. No one else ever had. "You drugged him," I said. "I found the pills. I talked to the pharmacy. And I know what you were doing." Her smile slipped for just a second. "Not fear, calculation. Your father was agitated. I was helping him rest. Sometimes medications get mixed up. It happens in this line of work." I shook my head. It wasn't a mistake. It was every day. Every visit. You wanted him dependent. Docile. Confused enough not to question why his nurse was whispering love stories in his ear. She didn't deny it. She didn't confess either. Instead, she leaned against the counter and looked at me with eyes too calm for the situation. "Your father is lonely. You might not see it, but I do. You give him food and chores and meds. I gave him company. I took a step closer. You seduced a man losing his mind." She tilted her head. Or maybe, he was just a man who remembered what it felt like to be wanted. There it was. The real weapon. Not pills. Not lies. Affection. She'd used his own heart against him, the years of missing my mother, the slow erosion of his dignity, and she filled the cracks with her presence. Her voice. Her touch. I told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the police. I had evidence. I had video. I'd spoken to the agency, and I wasn't afraid to take this as far as it needed to go. She picked up her purse slowly. Smoothed her hair in the hallway mirror. "You know," she said before walking out, "there's more than one way to help someone feel alive again. Just because you couldn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't real to him." And with that, she walked out of our lives, or so I thought. Dad didn't speak to me the rest of the night. Just stared at the front door like he was waiting for a knock that never came. And I realized then, getting rid of Elise was only the beginning. Undoing what she'd done. That was going to take a lot more than a threat and a locked door. Grief has a way of slipping into the room uninvited. It doesn't always come after a death. Sometimes it shows up after a goodbye that never felt right, after the wrong person walks away and leaves a wound where there should have been healing. That's what happened with Dad. The day after Elise left, he barely ate. Wouldn't look at me. Kept asking for the girl. Not by name, just the girl. Like she was a ghost who used to visit and whisper things only he could hear. He got up twice in the middle of the night, shuffling down the hall calling her name. Opened the front door once and stood there like she might be waiting on the porch. I had to guide him back to bed, gently, like a child after a nightmare. The worst part? His mind was clearer now. Without the pills dulling his brain, he had longer stretches of lucidity. But those moments were haunted, full of confusion and sorrow over a relationship he couldn't even explain. One morning, he finally said it out loud. She made me feel like I wasn't fading. That was it. No name. No story. Just that single, aching sentence. And I realized he wasn't just missing her. He was mourning her. I reached out to the agency again, pressed harder this time. Told them I knew they had more on Elise than they were letting on. The manager finally cracked. Said Elise had been redirected from multiple homes. Each time for inappropriate closeness. Never anything provable. Never anything that left a paper trail. She's careful, the manager admitted. Knows how to stay just inside the lines. I asked for the names of the other families. She said she couldn't give them out, privacy policies. But I knew someone who might help. A friend of mine from college, Jamie, worked as a nurse case manager over at County General. She pulled a few strings, checked the registry, and found 2 previous employers where Elise had briefly worked before getting let go. One was a private in-home agency. The other, a long-term care facility. Both had filed concerns, but no charges. No reports. Just quiet exits. That's how it works, Jamie told me. They let people like her slip through because proving emotional exploitation. It's murky. And no one wants a lawsuit. But this wasn't murky to me. This was intentional. She didn't just walk into our home and charm my father. She targeted his loneliness, his failing mind, and carved out a place in his heart that didn't belong to her. And now? Now he was spiraling. He started refusing meds. Ignoring meals. Not violently, just fading. Like he was slowly choosing to check out. I sat with him on the porch one evening, sunset stretching gold across the yard. He looked at me, eyes clearer than they'd been in weeks, and said, "You never asked what she meant to me." I swallowed the knot in my throat. Because I didn't want to hear it. He nodded, like he expected that answer. "I know what she did was wrong. I'm not stupid. But when your mind starts slipping, and someone leans in close enough to see you, really see you, it's hard to let go of that." He paused. I think part of me knew. But I didn't care. Not then. There was nothing left to argue. All I could do now was make sure she didn't do it again, not to someone else's father. Someone else's husband. Someone else who just needed to feel like they weren't being erased, day by day. I filed a report with the state licensing board. Sent them everything, the video, the records, the pills I'd bagged and labeled. They told me it would initiate a review. That's government speak for don't hold your breath. But I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for Dad. And for every other family who might not catch on until it's too late. The thing about memory is, it doesn't disappear all at once. It frays. It floats. Some pieces vanish forever, and others. They come back with startling clarity, like a lighthouse blinking through fog. A week after Elise was gone for good, Dad had one of those moments. We were sitting in the living room. I was flipping through an old photo album, trying to stir something familiar, anything to anchor him to the life he'd lived. He was quiet, nodding now and then, until I turned the page to a picture of Mom, taken during a 4th of July cookout years ago. She was laughing, holding a sparkler, her hair catching the golden hour just right. Dad stared at the photo for a long time. Then he said, "Your mother would have hated Elise." I looked at him. His eyes were sharp. No confusion, no distance. He was there. "What do you mean?" I asked. He tapped the edge of the photo, slowly. "She knew people. Could read them better than I ever could. And she'd have seen what that girl was doing. She always said it's easy to confuse affection with attention, especially when you're lonely." He sat back, breath shaky. "That's what I was, you know. Not stupid. Just lonely. I missed your mother so damn much I let a stranger rewrite the way I remembered being loved. I wanted to say something. Something comforting. But there wasn't a thing I could say that wouldn't sound hollow. Because he was right. He hadn't lost his mind. He'd surrendered it, bit by bit, to someone who made him feel wanted again. And that, I realized, was the true betrayal. Not the kiss on the cheek. Not the misplaced meds. Not even the stolen moments caught on camera. It was the manipulation of his grief. Elise didn't just seduce him. She seduced his pain. And Dad, he'd let her. Because when you're old, and tired, and the house echoes louder than it used to, just being seen can feel like salvation. He stayed clear for almost half an hour that day. We talked about Mom. About the garden she used to keep. The way she used to burn toast and claim it was intentional texture. He laughed. Really laughed. First time in weeks. Then, just as quickly, it faded. He blinked. Looked down at his hands. Asked where we were. The light dimmed again. But for that half hour, I got him back. And I made a promise, to him, to Mom, to myself, that I'd protect what was left. That I'd make sure no one else ever stepped into that home with a smile and a lie wrapped in scrubs. The licensing board got back to me a few days later. Said Elisa's license was officially under review. That she was being suspended pending an investigation into ethical violations in patient care. I knew it wasn't justice, not yet, but it was something. A start. And I kept digging. Talked to a woman from a nearby town, her father had the same story. A rapid decline after Elise started. Missing meds. Strange closeness. But they hadn't caught it in time. He died within months. She cried on the phone when I told her she wasn't crazy. That it hadn't just been in her head. We started keeping notes. Comparing dates, stories, behavior. We had a file now. A timeline. A pattern. And maybe, together, we'd make sure the next family didn't find out too late. Dad declined faster than any of us expected. The lucidity faded. The clear moments became flashes, brief flickers of recognition followed by long hours of confusion. He started sleeping more. Eating less. Talking only in murmurs that didn't quite form words. But even in the quiet, I stayed. Every day. Not because I was trying to be a hero. Not because I felt guilty about Elise. But because that's what love really is, isn't it? Not the grand gestures. Not the dramatic confessions. It's the choosing. Every day. When someone can't give you anything back, you show up anyway. I learned how to bathe him without making him feel small. Learned how to read the shift in his breath before a good day or a bad one. I read to him sometimes, old car magazines, his favorites, even when he couldn't follow the words. I played Johnny Cash softly through the speaker beside his bed. Sometimes, when I held his hand, he'd squeeze back. Not much, but just enough to remind me he was still there, somewhere beneath it all. The investigation into Elise dragged on. I kept getting emails from the licensing board, ongoing, under review, awaiting further testimony. Red tape. Delays. But I stayed on it. Kept sending updates. Kept logging every story I heard from families like mine. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want it to happen again. One night, a week before his last breath, Dad had another one of those flashes. I came in to check on him and found him staring at the ceiling, eyes wide, clear, aware. "You still here?" he asked. I smiled. Sat beside him. "Always." He looked at me for a long moment. Then said, "You did good, kid. You turned out better than me." I didn't argue. Didn't correct him. Just squeezed his hand and said, "I turned out because of you." He nodded once. Closed his eyes. And didn't speak again. He passed quietly, just after sunrise, while I was making coffee. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't absence. It wasn't shock. It was peace. Because he hadn't died under Elisa's spell. He hadn't gone out confused or drugged or clutching a lie. He went out loved. Cared for. And that mattered more than anything else. The funeral was small. A few neighbors. Old army buddies who made the drive. My brother came in from Texas. We stood around telling stories, about the time Dad drove through a blizzard to fix a stranger's radiator, about the ridiculous turkey fryer incident that singed off his eyebrows one Thanksgiving. We laughed more than we cried. That's how he would have wanted it. After the service, I stood at his grave for a long while. Just me and the wind. I didn't say much. Just one sentence. "I got you to the finish line, Pop." And I did. In the weeks that followed, I kept pushing the investigation. Elisa's license was officially revoked. Charges were being considered. It wouldn't undo what happened, but it meant her story, her pattern, would be known. Maybe someone else would ask the right questions next time. Maybe another son or daughter would trust their gut before it was too late. Now. I'm still in the house. It's quieter, sure. Emptier. But sometimes I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and remember the good things. The smell of engine oil in the garage. My dad's laugh when I messed up the lawnmower again. The sound of Johnny Cash playing while he hummed along, eyes closed, tapping his fingers like he was still riding the rhythm of a younger life. And when I think about love now, I don't think about flowers or flirtation. I think about showing up. Staying present. Protecting someone when they can't protect themselves. That's what love still means to me.